This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
American Creed, a local perspective on this edition of inStudio.
WSRE presents The American's Creed, passed by Congress 100 years ago in 1918.
I believe in the United States of America as a government of the people,
by the people, for the people,
whose just powers are derived from the consent of the governed,
a democracy and a republic, a sovereign nation of many sovereign states,
a perfect union,
one and inseparable, established upon those principles
of freedom, equality, justice, and humanity,
for which American patriots sacrificed their lives and fortunes.
I therefore believe it is my duty to my country to love it,
to support its Constitution,
to obey its laws,
to respect its flag,
and to defend it against all enemies.
WSRE invites you to share your ideas of what being American means to you. Go online to WSRE.org/American Creed and learn how you can share your own American Creed story.
I just love that. Beautifully produced. And that was some of the WSRE staff reciting the America's Creed, written in 1917. Well, recently PBS joined with former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and Pulitzer Prize-winning historian David M. Kennedy to revisit the American's Creed through a documentary entitled American Creed, including other unique Americans. The film focuses on unifying the nation, crossing party and ideological lines, and producing productive conversation geared toward helping Americans find our common ideals. Let's take a look at a trailer from that film.
Americans don't have ties of blood. We're not all one ethnic group. So what does hold us together as a society?
It starts with us, regathering ourselves around values, experiences, stories about what it is to be an American.
Just a little tease there. WSRE PBS for the Gulf Coast was chosen as one of 10 local PBS member stations around the country for a grant to help foster discussion within local communities. On this edition of inStudio, we will be speaking with a variety of individuals looking to encourage conversations at the grassroots level. Dr. Doug Mock earned his PhD from Boston University. He is a published author and specialist on the American presidency and political philosophy. He teaches political science and history at Pensacola State College and for the University of Texas at Arlington. Last year, PSC recognized Dr. Mock with an Outstanding New Faculty Award. Well, for over 2 decades, Frederick Rick Pierson has spent a great deal of his time interacting with a variety of young people pursuing higher education. I imagine a few older ones too. Pierson is an adjunct professor at Northwest Florida State College. Professor Pierson has earned 2 Masters in American Studies from Fairfield University and International Relations from Troy University. So I want to welcome you both to the program. And as we've been saying, PBS has been exploring how an American creed can shape society. It's often stated that belief really affects behavior. And so you've both had a chance to see the film, and we're grateful that you've come on to further the discussion. Honored to have you both. You're so... Thank you. You know so many things that I don't know. And so I'm going to let you have fun with this segment and not talk too much more. But first of all, you both saw screenings of the film at PSC and also at Northwest Florida State. So I'll start with you, Dr. Mock, and ask you about the American Creed. What is that?
Well, the question that the documentary was really seeking to answer is there such a thing as an American creed? Because one of the things I think we've all noticed is that we live in a time where we talk past each other instead of to each other, and we all are quick to sort of recognize what it is that divides us, whether it's culturally or philosophically. So the question that this documentary is attempting to answer is, well, okay, what is it that unites us? What is it to be an American? Is there even such a thing as an American creed? And I think it was really productive that you had two very prominent scholars at Stanford University, one Pulitzer Prize-winning liberal Democrat and one a conservative Republican who had served at the highest levels of government, get together and say, let's focus for a while on what it is that brings us together. I liked Condoleezza Rice's answer when she said, if there is an American creed, to her mind it was that what matters here is where we're going and not where we've been and where we've come from. So I think it was I was pleased that we were one of 10 institutions that was able to conduct a screening of it, and I think it was very thought-provoking and a real benefit to my students.
And that's what we've been seeking to do. You saw the screening in Crestview, so WSRE has really reached out to different aspects of the community. What are your thoughts?
Well, I was impressed by first of all, the diversity of the people there. I mean, they're all different ethnicities, races, and walks of life, places in life. And what struck me is that one of the things that some of the common things that they had in common. One thing I did notice that was kind of overarching thing was that they all had a hope that America would be a place for them to fulfill their dreams. And their dreams, of course, were quite different from one another. But they saw that each one had hope. There were no despondency there, no despair there. And there were also different themes. Not everyone had the same theme, of course, but one theme was that you have an obligation to help others. I mean, too much is given, much is required. And if you have something, you almost have a moral obligation to share it with others. America has had that for quite some time. That is a way of looking at American history, of always taking what we have, even when they may not want it at times, but giving into other people, manifest destiny, and what we've done in the 20th century and so forth. So there are things that are common. There were other themes as well, but love of country as well.
And how can we, as Americans, help each other and facilitate these not only the conversations but actions?
Well, when you speak of conversation, I think we tend to forget that an important part of conversation is listening. Exactly. We all know about the talking part. There's all kinds of issues out there, whether it's, we had a shooting recently in Florida where whether it's gun control or any number of things that divide us. And instantly, when one of these controversial events happen, you see on social media, everybody starts to post with what is usually bumper sticker philosophy. And we tend to isolate ourselves in our own groups, and we talk to each other and confirm what we already thought. And there's also, I think, an unfortunate tendency in America today that we caricature the position of the other side. They're wrong. They must be evil or something because they don't agree with me. And I think it's a problem that we find on both the right and the left. We talk a lot, but we don't listen a lot.
Is this more prevalent today than it's been in the past, do you think?
Well, we've always had divisions in our country and the lack of listening. And it's amazing. I think that a lot of it, just demands just old-fashioned humility. The fact that one of the problems is that the divisions is that we think that we're right, and then we brook no disagreement with our own philosophies, and we don't listen to the other side. That we have to allow that we may be wrong, or that we might need correcting, and we don't take that. It's just a plain old, maybe old-fashioned lack of humility that both sides have, both the right and the left.
I'd love to know how we could change that.
Well, that's a good question. It's much easier said than done. I will, in response to your previous question, I will say I think it's worse than it ever has been in my lifetime.
Yes.
And let's not have an exalted view of American political history. I mean, politics was ugly in the 19th century as it is today. But the inability of people to talk to each other now, I think, is worse than it's ever been in my lifetime. I don't have a real good answer to your question. If I had an answer where I could say, this is it and this will solve it, somebody who's a lot smarter than me would have thought of it a long time ago. But speaking of us having similar divisions, I would remind Americans or of them having similar divisions years ago. The Constitutional Convention in 1787, you had people that were strongly opposed philosophically and were at each other's throats for those several months in Philadelphia. And if I could sort of steer young people today to one bit of advice from that Constitutional Convention, it's when Dr. Benjamin Franklin stood up near the end of the convention and he counseled everybody. He said, are there things that we've done here with which I disagree? He said, absolutely. Would I design something that in my mind was better? Absolutely, he says. And we all feel that way. But he said, I would counsel each of us to doubt a little of our own infallibility. I think when Professor Carey comes on in a little while, she may show you something that one of her students wrote about the American Creed that I really liked, this idea, and you alluded to a moment ago as well, that we need to have some humbleness in our own approach to these issues that divide us.
Are you using this type of conversation in your classrooms right now?
Very much. I talk about the American Creed. I don't label it as such, but I go back to the beginning. The beginning of our country is the most important part, I believe, and I go over the principles, on which we stand, on why we are where we are. And we've always been a creedal nation ever since the Pilgrims landed, less than a few weeks after they landed in Provincetown, or where Provincetown is now. They had a Mayflower Compact. They needed something to adhere to, bind everyone together under a civil, in a civic politic. And we've always had a creed. And then with Declaration of Independence, I mean, that is probably more than anything else, in my opinion anyway, the best statement of what Americans believe in.
And we need to hear more and more about this. We could talk about this all day long. I would love to. You had an opportunity to actually have two of the main people that were in the film into your classrooms. How did that go?
Oh, that was excellent. Yeah, we had two of the folks who had really inspiring stories and are now, celebrities that were here that kind of alluded to the theme that you mentioned a moment ago, that there's something larger than what you do with your own life, that there's something outside yourself there. Tegan Griffith, who was a Marine veteran, and Terrence Davenport, who started a company in Arkansas that helps low-income people make money on the internet. So they both saw something larger than themselves, and they spoke to my classes. They presented at the screening, and they were really thought-provoking and excellent speakers, both of them.
I enjoyed the after screening, and people are going to be able to continue to see this film online. And would you encourage people to watch this and start their own dialogues?
Well, if my classes want extra credit, they will. They'll watch it. They'll be watching it. You got a good audience right there.
Yeah, that's great.
But,
that's great. Well, again, we're just about out of time. But what do you think what are your most important takeaways? I'll give each of you some time to. What do you want to say to Americans?
My most important takeaway. I mean, we've kind of talked about this theme of getting involved in something that's larger than your own individual circumstances. I would encourage American citizens to get involved in the political process. It's one of the characteristics of the United States that our voters, and it's not just voting, but our voters participate at a much lower rate than most of the industrialized world. One of the consequences of that, and this is very well documented, is the people that do participate, the small percentage that do take part, tend to be on the extremes of the political world, one side or the other. And most Americans are not far right or far left. Most of us are somewhere in the broad center.
In the middle, and we need to remember that. Your final thoughts?
Well, going back to the Declaration, I mean, two things from that stand out that we need to remember is that all men are created equal. None of us are born lower or higher than the other. And therefore, if we're all born equally free, then our government is based on the consent of the governed. We give our consent, and that's a bulwark, I believe, against tyranny. And the other is that Jefferson said we have inalienable rights given to us by our Creator, that no government has the right to infringe upon. And then he would refer to John Locke, who says, the philosopher said, you have a right to resist government, and it violates those God-given, those Creator-given rights that you have. And I think those two principles help us to maintain the free society, because if there's one thing that we're based on, it is freedom.
Right. Amen. Well, and so we need to have you two back on for a full hour, because I feel bad even wrapping up, but I'm going to have to do that. So thank you so much for your time and for being here.
Thanks for having us.
You're quite welcome.
When we come back, we'll meet 5 local citizens who, in their own way, are working to unite and inspire our community. We're discussing the PBS documentary American Creed and how our community can help facilitate understanding among its citizens. We'll be back right after this.
To be an American means I have the right to soar in my truth. It's the land of promises where there are unlimited possibilities for everyone. Each American has equal opportunities regardless of religion, race, age, and ethnical background. Therefore, one may be, do, and achieve more than he or she can ever imagine. Also, as an American, each individual can dream big and with hard work, make it become a reality. I remember my grandmother sharing her stories about how hard it was for her to survive and not be able to read or write. In those difficult times, the opportunity to be great and get an education was not in reach for her. Because of our ancestors and great leaders who have paved the way, I am proud and grateful to be called an American.
WSRE invites you to share your ideas of what being American means to you. Go online to WSRE.org/American Creed and learn how you can share your own American Creed story.
Welcome back. This is In Studio on WSRE. Our topic, the PBS documentary American Creed and its local perspective. I mentioned earlier in the program that WSRE was selected as one of 10 local PBS member stations to participate in furthering the discussion around the theme of the American Creed documentary. In doing so, we searched for citizens who portray in their own unique way what America and community is all about.
People were always telling me, you can't save the world. And I was like, well, that's not going to stop me from trying.
When I learned that I am a Creek Indian, at that moment, my thirst for knowledge to know everything about the culture, the heritage, the language, at that moment it was in full drive, and I have not stopped since.
Over the past couple of years, I have just been really saddened at people feeling like they can't do anything to make a difference, or that they're too young, or that the nation is too divided.
We're two human beings with the same ideas, the same thoughts, same intellect, same dreams, but yet only because we were born on different sides of a fence. That's the only difference we have.
So if I can go out and teach people how to start making better decisions, start believing in themselves, then we can have that great America that we all want so much.
I'm Dan Helms. I'm the Vice Chief of the Santa Rosa County Creek Indian Tribe. Being an American is an idea. It's not a blood. And I think the Constitution of the United States is the recipe for being an American. And part of that responsibility for being an American is to protect our land and our people. In 1860, the Indian Removal Act was put into place, and it was unlawful to be an Indian east of the Mississippi River. And so my ancestors never spoke of being an Indian for fear that they would lose their lives, and they never passed the culture down to their children. When I was a small child, I always had a longing to know where I came from. I wanted to know everything about the language, about the heritage, about the culture. We are building a 4,000 square foot Native American Cultural Center here on our tribal grounds. One of the main things that we're going to do with the Cultural Center, other than an artifacts museum, is we're going to have a language program to teach the Muskogee language. We must preserve the language. To lose the language is to lose the culture.
I'm Tris. I'm a 16-year-old singer-songwriter and activist. To be American is, for me, to be a piece of a larger whole and to be one in this nation of so many diverse and unique people that celebrates all these different cultures and has all these different traditions but is still unified. My passion really developed for raising money for pediatric cancer and uniting people through music and selfless causes when I was selected to be a featured sick kid in a movie that was taping in Atlanta. And I came across a young man named Ethan Ferguson, and I found out later, after the whole shooting had wrapped, that he was battling brain cancer. So I'm a young ambassador for the Tyler Robinson Foundation, which was founded by Imagine Dragons after one of their closest fans passed away from a rare form of pediatric cancer. And his story, among Ethan Ferguson's story, the young man that I met when I was filming that movie, just really pushed me forward, and I started not accepting Christmas presents and making birthday presents, all donations to the foundation. And eventually that led to me speaking in classrooms, getting to do benefit concerts where I share my own music among some of my favorite Imagine Dragons songs that helped some of these cancer patients get through their treatments has been really powerful. And I've gotten to see firsthand how music can bring people to extreme emotion and unite and connect them.
My name is Michele Coker. I served in the United States Navy as an aviation machinist mate, and I am currently a student at Pensacola State College. For me, being American is the ability to make my own choices. To help people that struggle in life to make their own choices, that are having hardships. I believe that it's about a unity, coming together on on the same level despite your diversity. My first encounter with a social worker, which is what I'm studying in school, was I got ill and I went on dialysis, and I had to deal with a social worker in order to get put on the transplant list. And so that really, I was inspired by this person that was dedicated to me to help me get better. After that, my daughter passed away about 2 years ago, and I encountered a counselor that was more than a counselor. And I promised my daughter that I was going to go back to school and pursue my social worker, because I have this thing for helping people. I've always loved people. I currently do a lot of homeless outreach, as well as serve as the service officer at the American Legion. You encounter people at the worst points in their life and try to help them, to find a resolution to their problems.
My name is Grace Resendez McCaffrey, and I am the owner of La Costa Latina newspaper. So in 2004, Hurricane Ivan hit Pensacola directly, and shortly after, we experienced a large and rapid influx of Spanish-speaking labor workers that came to help rebuild the community. I try to cover different aspects within the newspaper, published twice a month, and what I try to do is keep people up on events that are going on so that people can become more social, become part of the community. The newspaper is bilingual, so English speakers can pick it up and see what we're up to. What does it mean to be an American to me? Sometimes it means everything in the world, and sometimes it means nothing. My Americanness means everything, because that's the only difference. But when I'm face to face with someone who's telling me that they wanted to go to school and study public relations, or send their kids to college, or have a career, or do anything else than what they're doing, it almost means nothing. It feels like it's not fair. We're two human beings with the same ideas, the same thoughts, same intellect, same dreams, but yet only because we were born on different sides of a fence. My everyday is about being there for anybody who is in that situation. They've got a need and a language barrier, and there's no need to suffer for that.
My name is Steve Wilmer, husband, father, author, and speaker, and Pensacolian. What it means to me to be an American are a few things. Number one, opportunity. You think about America, you think about the land of opportunity. So many opportunities for people. It also gives me a sense of freedom, but most importantly, I would probably say pride. The one thing that most people really don't think about is responsibility. And as an American, I feel it's my responsibility, we all have responsibility to do the things that have to be done, sometimes to make the hard choice, and I think most importantly to make sure that all other Americans are taken care of as well. Born and raised right here in Pensacola. There's a project used to be downtown called Aragon Court Project. That's where I grew up to a single mother on welfare. Graduated from Pensacola High School. I had a teacher tell me, you're never going to amount to anything. And then you look at my grades said, you're never going to amount to anything. But once I stopped listening to people, and once I started listening to what God said about me, and then I really believe that I do have the potential, again, everybody has the potential, I do have the potential to be greater. I do have the potential to have the things that I want in life. And I started going after those things. And the problem is this, not everybody realizes that. People think that they're absolutely destined to be what they have right now because of their circumstances. So I'm always saying you're not a product of your circumstances, you're a product of your decisions. And I believe that my gift is to go out and to encourage others to be the best that they can, to unlock all the potential that's on the inside of them. I absolutely believe that every single person in this world was given a gift by God.
My hope for America's future would be for people to set aside their differences and focus on their common grounds, which is the fact that we're all human beings, we all have a dream, and we all are passionate about something. And it's just time to forget that we're different and remember that we're alike.
What I hope for America's future is compassion. I think that we need to look at ourselves as part of a global community, and we need to be mindful of our similarities as well as our differences so that we can learn how to live more harmoniously. We're all just trying to get through this life, and we need each other.
My hope for Americans' future is harmony. Harmony between people, and harmony between people and the land. I can only hope that we are able to achieve harmony before it's too late, because after it's too late, we may not be able to rebuild, and we may lose the America that we know and love.
I hope that in America's very near future, people can recognize the beauty that lies in all of our differences and not judge other people because we're not like them, and just come together and spread peace and love and be the best that we can be and build each other up.
My hope for America's future is plainly put is just turning back to God. You know, we're always saying God bless America and God this, and we say it with our words, but sometimes I don't think our actions line up.
So inspiring, and that piece was produced here locally by WSRE as part of the American Creed Initiative. It demonstrates how belief affects behavior. That was the Greater Pensacola perspective. When we come back, American Creed in the classroom. This is In Studio on WSRE.
The freedoms we enjoy as Americans are guaranteed by the Bill of Rights. But with these rights come responsibilities. For example, I am free to say almost anything I please, but so are you. And I have an obligation not only to allow you to speak, but to carefully consider your words. If we find we disagree, we are not enemies, but rather fellow Americans who are free to hold different opinions. I should not assert my rights at the expense of yours. In fact, I should welcome the assertion of the rights of all in order to promote justice, equality, and the general welfare. Many Americans gave their lives in support of these ideals, and I feel that the very least I can do is to be fully engaged as a citizen, and especially to exercise my right to vote. If we expect our government to do what is right, we have an obligation to participate in the political process. To be an American means I am free to do almost anything I please within the law, but I have a responsibility to act not just in my own interests, but for the benefit of the nation as a whole.
WSRE invites you to share your ideas of what being American means to you. Go online to WSRE.org/American Creed and learn how you can share your own American Creed story.
You are watching In Studio on WSRE, our topic, American Creed, a local perspective. The American Creed movement is moving into the classroom, prompting some teachers and students to engage in discussion and projects to further the dialogue. Now we're joined by Amber Carey. She's an assistant professor of Spanish and the honors program coordinator at Pensacola State College. Ms. Carey has taught at PSC since 2007 and became the honors program coordinator in 2015. She incorporated American Creed into her Honors College Forum course, employing the themes to discuss what it means to be an American and a leader. Kasey Jones, the WSRE American Creed project manager. Kasey has facilitated all aspects of the local conversation for the National American Creed Dialogue. In addition to producing the local companion piece, Kasey, along with WSRE's Educational Outreach Department, reached out to teachers in our viewing area with resources that provided tools to encourage conversations in the classroom. And so we will also introduce Isabella Ludergnani. She is a junior at Gulf Breeze High School. Isabella's AP US history teacher, Amy Parker, utilized WSRE's digital storytelling project as an assignment. Isabella answered the call to create a video that shares the perspective of what it means to be an American. And although many great videos were received by WSRE, Isabella's rose to the top, and so we'll get a chance to view her submission later in the segment. So I want to thank all of you for being here, and I will start with Kasey because she has really been the driving force behind this whole thing. We got the grant at WSRE and she took the ball and ran with it. Tell us about it, Kasey.
Well, we submitted the grant back in November and really have been executing it January, February. And it's come together very organically. I went to a few of our PSC professors in the beginning and they were on board right away. Rick Pierson we met earlier, he volunteered a week out from our Crestview event along with 2 other faculty members at Northwest Florida State College. So very grateful for all of the educators who have been involved. We've had, a number of other PSC faculty members who've brought their students into the studio to learn how to do the digital storytelling, and that was Jen Earhart. And yeah, so it's been really great. It's come together, evolved over time, and I hate to see that our, full efforts are over, but I feel like we're going to be talking about this for months and years to come. I mean, it's a discussion that has to happen, and it has been happening. We're just, putting it out there and engaging the community. So it's been very rewarding.
And as a community member, I want to thank you because it is a discussion that's long overdue. Would you agree with that, Amber?
I would. I think right now as a nation, we are so deeply divided that this is a conversation that is uncomfortable to have at times. But I think it's very important. A lot of times it's easier to cut people who disagree with you out of your life rather than have those hard conversations. And that's really where growth comes from.
And were you happy to have this opportunity to bring this into your classroom?
I was thrilled. I teach an honors college forum class, and our focus is leadership, and this fit in perfectly because a lot of what is in the American Creed applies to being a good leader as well. So my students really responded. They had some amazing thoughts and insights that they responded to the American Creed and rose to the challenge with.
Well, and I want to hear about some of those in just a little bit. I want to check in with Isabella, who also answered the call, and your teacher, Amy Parker at Gulf Breeze High School, introduced this as maybe, was it an optional assignment?
Yes, it was an optional assignment. Any of the kids in the class were allowed to do it.
And so, a lot of times you've got a lot of homework, and if you're in an AP class, I have a junior in high school myself, I know she's busy all the time. To take on something like a film to put together is, you didn't have to do it. Why'd you do it?
I thought that it was an interesting topic. I felt like it gave me an opportunity to voice my opinion on what it means to be an American and talk about a relevant issue in today's society and maybe how to fix that issue.
And you're a first-generation American?
Yes, I have 2 immigrant parents, so this has given me a deeper appreciation on what it means to be an American, maybe.
Well, and so tell me about your film, and we'll take a look at it.
So my film is about the American identity and the inequalities that women are facing in today's society. It's from the point of view from one woman, Janet Salas. She talks about what it means to be an American and struggles that women are facing today. So she was the organizer of the Pensacola Women's March last year. That's why I chose her to interview.
Great. Well, let's take a look at that. We'll be right back.
I think to be an American means to have this opportunity to exercise liberty and to have that protected. And you have your rights, which allow you to go forth into the community and do and say certain things and behave in certain ways. And the laws are there to safeguard your liberties and not to restrict your liberties. Because the general rule is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But then we have the opportunity to do that in a lawful society. And I think that's one of the best parts of being an American, and you're protected and you're given all this freedom. It's like the great American West. You're just given this open space that is beautiful and untamed. I think the conflict that I see today that really concerns me or upsets me is the lack of addressing human rights as it relates to women in our country. So we have this great cohesive idea of American liberation and autonomy, and yet there are so many ways that women in our society don't have access to that. We can't act out of that. You think about child care and how prohibitive it is for some women to access child care. You think about health care and how prohibitive it is for women to access that individually. And I think there's an easy solution to that, and that is to start at the building block, which is address that the Constitution does not specifically mention women, and have an amendment that begins to put that in motion and acknowledge that because women are human, we have human rights, and that would get the ball rolling. So childcare is prohibitive because a lot of times when a woman goes to work, she has to find childcare. And when she has to find childcare, that takes time and that takes energy. It has to be reliable, it has to be safe, it has to be during the hours that she's going to work. And a lot of women can't do that. Also, affording that childcare is a huge problem. It is so expensive, and there's no kind of allowance or stipend or anything given to women who have to pursue that.
Beautifully done by Isabella. Congratulations on that, and for bringing that to our attention as Americans. Kasey, we're still accepting some submissions for those films, correct?
Yes. The National Writing Project has a publishing site, and it's writingourfuture.org/American Creed. They are accepting essays, 500-word essays. Kids from all over the country are writing essays about what it means to them to be an American. And they're also doing the videos and accepting all sorts of media.
So that can keep going on.
It is, and it will stay up for, the foreseeable future.
I would imagine you're available if a teacher wants to call and talk to you about what they can do in their classroom. You'd be happy to talk to them?
Absolutely. And the AmericanCreed.org website has the full featured film that can be shown in classrooms. It also has teacher resources available, reading list, and other resources that Amber took a look at before she, dove into it herself. So.
And Amber, how was that for you, and how are your students responding?
To be honest, I was really inspired by my students. They really took it seriously. Some of the themes that kept arising and how they interpreted the American Creed, they really noted that it is an ideal. It is not something that we have reached. It's something we strive for constantly. They really looked at service to our community, service to our country, service to each other, and the importance of education in that we need to be informed, an informed public to make informed decisions. One of my students took a very JFK-esque role to it. He said, we normally look at what our country and government is supposed to do for us. However, we rarely look at what we are supposed to do for our country. My vision is that of a citizen who's done his best to benefit and give back at the same time, Benny Segovia. And I had another student who I was just astounded by her response to this, but it echoes so true for us. She said, I truly believe that the ego of the nation is hindering our progress forward. We need to be a humble nation that accepts compliments with grace and takes criticisms mindfully before reacting. We need to mentally step out of our borders to look within the heart of our nation's most divisive issues. To do so, we need to lay down our egos and perhaps take notes from countries who have seen success in the areas in which we fall short. Josephine, and I think we can also apply that to the conversations we have with each other. Sometimes ego gets in the way, and I think if we can step aside and have civil and respectful conversations about our differences and our opinions and our similarities, that really helps move the conversation forward.
Those are very, very insightful and amazing.
And one of her students was Michele Coker, who was in our featured local segment. So thank you, Amber, for that.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Makes me tear up every time. It's just so inspiring. We don't have a lot of time. Isabella, you are really getting involved. Young people today, we need you more than ever because we are a little divided, as everyone has mentioned. What are your thoughts on that, and what are some of the things you're doing about that?
I do think that we are extremely divided as a nation. I think that's actually one of our biggest problems. If we could all come together and start compromising, a lot of our issues could potentially be solved. So right now, I'm currently co-organizing a Sister March for Our Lives in Santa Rosa County. It's going to happen at my school, Gulf Breeze High School, and I'm doing it with the Santa Rosa Young Democrats and the local contact for Moms Demand Action in America for gun sense. So I was basically just inspired by the Parkland kids, how they turned their pain and frustration into activism, and I said, well, let me do the same.
Absolutely. Well, congratulate you on that. What's the date on that?
It's going to be March 24th, Saturday morning from 10 to 12.
Okay, so viewers, mark your calendars on that and applaud your local young people. Any final thoughts? We're about out of time.
It was such a moving experience for me and my Robinson Scholars that I actually took the conversation home to my 11-year-old and my 5-year-old, and we talked about that. And I think it's important to integrate that and have that discussion while they're young. As you can tell, youth has a lot of potential.
Well, and we need our youth because of the divisiveness within the country. Final thoughts, Kasey?
I'm just so appreciative of everyone who's participated, and I hope that more and more people will engage in this conversation and submit stories to the National Writing Project and just talk to each other.
And if they haven't had a chance to watch the film, right?
Yes.
Thank you all for being here. We enjoyed having you so much. When we come back, two local citizens working to help people turn their lives around and discover their own American dream. This is In Studio on WSRE, PBS for the Gulf Coast.
To be an American is, to me, more about a way of living rather than just a place I live. I take pride in the life offered to me because of the sacrifices made by so many others. I find joy in being able to cast my vote or choose my own career path or simply being able to make the Pledge of Allegiance to my country's flag. Being married to a United States Army veteran, I appreciate more than ever those who put their lives second to our country. It truly makes my heart swell with pride. I cannot imagine being born into any other country in this world than right here in the United States of America. I have rights, I have privileges, and I have freedom. But most of all, I have choices, a chance to be whatever or whoever I want to be. And for that, I am thankful and grateful for all that America gives back to me.
WSRE invites you to share your ideas of what being American means to you. Go online to WSRE.org/American Creed and learn how you can share your own American Creed story.
Welcome back to In Studio, our topic, American Creed, a local perspective. Oftentimes, for a variety of reasons, people find themselves in difficult and challenging places in life. Our next two guests are working to help those folks find a way out, to improve and enhance their lives, and realize their own American dreams. They also have thoughts and their own perspectives on the American Creed film and local project. Paul Stadden, many of you may recognize Paul's name from his many years working in the field of broadcasting. Today, Paul Stadden is working as a public relations associate with Waterfront Rescue Mission, a nonprofit that has served the homeless and those with addictions for over 60 years. Paul has some interesting stories to tell due to his extensive experience working with all different kinds of Americans. And Bruni Emmanuel. Many of you know Bruni from his decades of work in and around our community. Bruni Emmanuel is the founder of the UniVision Group, a consulting company focused on peacemaking since 1992, and I'm honored to have both of you here. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us.
To be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're here. Now, I did see, Bruni, I saw you at the screening of American Creed. Did you walk away from that with any thoughts?
You know, I walked away with more kind of questions in my mind about, okay, so what? And now here we are doing the what. And I love that. And I'm really appreciative to you and Katie and the whole team for making this happen.
Well, we have been honored to do that. And I jumped in and volunteered on this edition of In Studio because I feel very strongly about that. And like you said, you say, okay, so what? And you've probably had a chance to see the film. Paul, what were your thoughts?
I came away with such respect for those involved who can have these opposing viewpoints but still show so much respect for each other. And I miss that. You know, in talking with people every single day who come from so many different backgrounds, you're always trying to find that, what do we have in common? And seeing people who have risen to such a level like Condoleezza Rice, where you've made your entire life about having a certain viewpoint, and you can still go up to somebody who says, I don't believe in what you believe, but let's talk about it. Let's hash it out, and let's see where we can find that common ground, because that's what's really going to help people. That blows me away, and I love seeing that.
I think we all love seeing that. And as a broadcaster, you had a lot of different calls coming in and all that. How was that for you?
Well, being on a talk radio show and being the phone screener, you get told a lot of things when you're picking up that line, but it's okay, because if I'm getting a reaction from somebody and they're willing to share with me their viewpoint, I try to appreciate that, even if they're doing it through shouts. That's okay, because it shows me that somebody's passionate enough about something to be involved. And I'd much rather have that than the person who's sitting there stewing but never picks up that phone, because that doesn't help me. If you have a great viewpoint and I don't know about it, I can't help.
Very well put.
Which is one of the beautiful things about the young lady that was on your show earlier. Don't you love it that the kids are speaking up?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That they're speaking the truth to power, and the continual balance is, how do you do that respectfully and effectively? But I just love that energy I see happening.
I love that too.
Isabella was beautiful.
I totally agree. You're and how do you do that? As a psychologist, you've got that, you've got some. Did I phrase that wrong? But you've had a background in counseling and helping other people. How do you help facilitate that?
You know, one of the realities that I've come to understand, though I'm not sure I have the answer to it, is how do we motivate human behavior with positive incentives as opposed to negative incentives? You know, why does it take pain to make us want to change? And I see that in so many aspects of life, and I still wrestle with that, you know, however 40 or 50 years into doing this. And I'm particularly interested in taking a look back with race relations in our country, because I think we're making great progress in ways, and there's a lot more progress that needs to be made. So I think we'll talk a little bit later about some of those specific activities going on in our community.
Talking about specific activities at the Waterfront Rescue Mission, you've got a lot going on there, some inspiring stories and some sad stories and all kinds of things.
Well, that's part of the nature of working in addiction recovery, is there are always going to be sad stories. People who relapse and use drugs again, it happens. You know, every single facility in the country is going to talk about the relapse rate. And I love focusing on those people who make a huge change, because here's the thing. When we talk about the nature of success, we have to look at the entire person. So let's say somebody comes into Waterfront Rescue Mission, and let's say they were a drug dealer, beat their spouse, maybe they were deeply racist, whatever it happens to be, and they come out on the other side, and months down the line, they use drugs again. But they're still loving their wife as they should. They're still getting over that racism, and they're no longer seeing the world as this black and white and different colors. They're seeing people as people. Okay, they use drugs again, but they are such a different person in every other way. There's so many other measurements of success, and we want to focus on those good things. You're talking about positive reinforcement before.
Right.
One of my favorite psychology examples was the difference between negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement. And our psychologist said, okay, I'm going to try to guide you to where I want you to go. You're going to walk past this desk, and if you go too far, I'm going to pound on the table. And the person was constantly trying to figure out where exactly he wanted him to go. Couldn't figure it out. It took him 5 minutes. And he said, okay, now positive reinforcement. When you get close to where I want you to go, and you're getting to where I want you to be, I'm going to hit the table. Took him 5 seconds. The difference between positive and negative reinforcement is huge, and we always try to give those guys a goal of, you're going to mess up, and it's okay. There's grace here.
Something positive, grace, there's that word. Grace. And Bruni, you were talking about all the wonderful things that are happening in our community.
And there are. And one of them that I just want to kind of talk a little bit about right now is the lynching project under Equal Justice Institute out of, Equal Justice Initiative out of Montgomery. There's a group of people here in Pensacola who are working to recognize and bring some kind of closure to the reality of the 5 people who were extrajudiciously lynched here in Escambia County. That's an example to me of the white community and the African American community being willing to stop and atone for and acknowledge the abuses of the past. That kind of conversation. Here it has to do with lynching. There are a lot of other ones going on in the community. And the more that those of us from different perspectives can speak respectfully with each other, the better. And I love that this is happening here in our hometown.
I keep hearing the words respect, humility, and all of these things. We don't have a lot of time. Paul, you have a really strong example of people coming together.
One of my favorite examples is a man who came through a program who was directly from jail. He was a white supremacist. He dealt and did drugs. After going through the program, his best friend in the world was a former black drug dealer. They became roommates. And that's the talk about reconciliation I love. I mean, I can give thousands and thousands of stories. I'm not kidding, thousands of stories of this reconciliation. A man who was half dead from alcohol poisoning in the woods of Fort Walton Beach comes and stays with us, gets over the alcoholism, works for us, and says, if it weren't for Waterfront Rescue Mission, I wouldn't know I was a winner. But thanks to them, I do know I'm a winner.
Yeah, that's just amazing. And you've got those stories from your work with Pathways for Change.
Yeah, and the Friary some time back. One thing I do want to state about addiction, though, is essential that people understand that addiction is, or recovery has aspects of body, mind, and spirit. And we got to be focused on all of those aspects of the human self in order to recover from addiction or whatever the situation is.
And speaking of that, what are some of the things in the remaining moments we have you'd like to tell our viewers in regards to this conversation?
Everybody has been touched by addiction. You never know when it's going to touch you. You may know someone who's a couch surfer. That person's homeless. Somebody who lives out of their car. That person's homeless. There are people who hide their addictions well. Don't think it can't happen to you or your family or your friends, because it can happen to anyone. There are people who have come through our doors who have been chronically homeless their entire lives. There are people with master's degrees. It doesn't matter. So come and see the faces of those people who realize for the first time in their life maybe that they do matter and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I challenge everybody to not think of the homeless or the addicted as another species, but they have names, they're people.
Well, Bruni, we've got 30 seconds. What are your final thoughts?
Well, again, I want to affirm WSRE for what y'all have done with the project. The more we're able to put a spotlight on the need for reconciliation and dialogue, the better. And y'all are doing it, so thank you.
Well, thank you both for being here. We'll dialogue some more. I think this conversation definitely needs to continue for a long time. So thank you for helping us with that. And thanks to our guests on this special broadcast, part of WSRE's Community Engagement Initiative. We have been discussing American Creed, a documentary collaboration by PBS member station WTTW, featuring former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian David M. Kennedy, and many other notable Americans. The film and our local piece entitled A Greater Pensacola Perspective are available for viewing at wsre.org/American Creed. WSRE hopes you will watch it. And we hope that you will join the conversation around the dinner table, on social media, and in classrooms. As this discussion continues, we ask you, what does it mean to you to be an American or live in America? We'd love for you to engage with fellow citizens and political leaders in an effort to promote thoughtful and productive discussion. This for the benefit of all of America. I'm Sherri Hemminghaus Weeks. Thank you for watching.